Melos, 1820. A peaceful farmhouse sits comfortably on a hillside overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. Deep within the shade of an ancient olive tree, a mother nurses an infant. The baby looks contentedly into the mother's eyes. Perched high in the branches of the tree is Athena, her adolescent daughter. From her vantage point, she sees a ship anchored in the harbor. Athena spies a line of soldiers and a horse pulling a wagon. "Mother, I see them coming!" "Go get your grandfather." Athena climbs down and runs barefoot across the hillside to an old man tending goats. Yorgos, Athena's grandfather, uses a knife to free a goat caught in brambles. "Grandfather, they are coming!" Yorgos sheathes his knife. The sun beats down on the company of men. Dumont d'Urville, the ship's science officer, and an official of the Ottoman Empire stop for a moment. D'Urville takes out a handkerchief and wipes his brow. "I swear this barbaric heat will be the end of me." "Don't worry, Your Grace. It's not much further." The Ottoman official opens his canteen and wipes off the opening with his sleeve and offers it to D'Urville. "You would like refreshment?" D'Urville looks at the canteen in disgust. "Oh, I think not." The entourage comes to a stop in front of a dilapidated barn. Yorgos stands at the door. D'Urville looks at Yorgos. "Where did this peasant find her?" "In a cave not far from here. The villagers tried to hide her, but we soon found out." Athena watches intently from the side of the barn. D'Urville eyes her. Athena stares him down. "Hello, Yorgos, my friend," says the official. "This is the gentleman I was telling you about, Monsieur d'Urville." Yorgos glares at the Ottoman official. "If you are my friend, why do you bring all the soldiers?" Monsieur d'Urville insisted. "I assure you these men are only here to protect what you have found." "Step aside, you fool," demands d'Urville. "Let me see what all this nonsense is about." A soldier pushes Yorgos aside. The Ottoman official waves his hand in dramatic fashion. "Monsieur d'Urville, I present you the Aphrodite of Melos." The barn door opens. A shaft of light falls on the statue. A graceful outstretched arm offers an apple. Her other arm holds a tunic at her hip. D'Urville stands awestruck. "The King of France will be most pleased." "No," yells Yorgos, "that is not what we agreed on." "Be reasonable, Yorgos. I am sure the gentleman intends to generously reward you for finding such a magnificent statue." D'Urville considers an offer. "Certainly I do. Dare I say 5 goats would suffice?" Yorgos spits the ground. "This is an insult." D'Urville looks around. "Okay then, one of my best riding mounts." D'Urville points to the sway-back nag pulling the wagon. The Ottoman official leans over to D'Urville and whispers, "Monsieur, it is forbidden for peasants to ride horses." D'Urville gives the official a quizzical look. "A donkey then. 5 goats and a donkey. That is my final offer." "No," cries Yorgos. "This scum of the Sultan has no authority to sell what rightfully belongs to my country. She is not for sale at any price." Yorgos takes a swing at the official. A soldier blocks his fist with a rifle, then clubs him to the ground. Athena runs to her grandfather and glares at the men. "You barbaric thieves!" Yorgos comes to his feet. "Someday Greece will break free from the shackles of the Sultan." The Ottoman official gives him a smug smile. "Unfortunately for you, that is not today." The official turns to D'Urville. "Such a pity he wasn't a bargaining man like me." "Then we are agreed upon a price?" "We are." D'Urville motions a soldier forward. The soldier pulls out a bag of coins and hands it to the Ottoman official, who receives the bag with a bow. "This fruitful exchange will no doubt bring you great honor and prestige when you return to France. And you, my fortunate friend, are now a wealthy man." The French frigate Chevrette strains against the mooring lines at the dock. Wagons haul goods to the ship. Sailors use a winch and pulley to load supplies into the ship's hold. Local villagers, including Athena, Yorgos, and a hulking Greek man, line the road and watch with horror and grief as their sacred statue rattles down the road like a piece of common cargo. Soldiers stand at the ready to keep the locals at bay. D'Urville oversees the cargo being loaded. He writes in a red leather-bound journal embossed with the coat of arms of Louis XVIII. Sailors lower the statue of Aphrodite into a crate filled with straw. The arms extend beyond the edge of the shallow crate, preventing the lid from being nailed shut. "Monsieur Derville," says the sailor, "she will not fit into the crate." Annoyed with this seemingly insignificant detail, Derville continues to sketch an image of the statue. "Build another crate, then." "The wind! She is coming." Derville stops sketching and looks out to sea. Waves crash against the cliffs. Yes, we need to get underway. He looks around and sees an open crate holding the pedestal of the statue. "Remove the arms. Store them with the pedestal. We can attach them later." Two sailors begin violently chiseling away at the arms. The villagers go wild with rage. The Greek hulk breaks through the line of soldiers and grabs one of the sailors. With Herculean strength, he flings the sailor across the dock like a rag doll. A soldier on horseback charges forward, sword drawn. He slashes at the giant man, cutting his ear and stabbing him in the side. The hulking man staggers back, slams into the statue, and snaps off an arm with a loud crack. He grabs his side and slumps to the ground in pain. Soldiers drag him away. The second sailor continues hammering until the other arm falls to the ground. Derville watches impassively. He makes quick slash marks across the sketch of Aphrodite, indicating where the cuts were made. The arms are thoughtlessly tossed into the crate with the pedestal. The crate containing Aphrodite is nailed shut, branded with the coat of arms of Louis XVIII, and heaved upward. Athena watches her grandfather weep. She has to do something to save Aphrodite. Athena grabs the knife from her grandfather's belt, tucks it into her waistband, and sprints to the ship. Soldiers grab at her, but she's too quick and slips past. Athena jumps into the ship's rigging and climbs, one sailor in hot pursuit. The sailor reaches Athena and grabs her leg. Athena yanks it free and gives the sailor a savage kick in the chest. He falls backward into the rigging. Athena grabs the rope hauling the statue and furiously begins cutting. Derville yells at the soldier standing next to him, "Shoot her, you damn fool!" The soldier takes aim and fires. The shot hits the mast just above Athena's head. She redoubles her efforts. The soldier reloads, takes careful aim, and fires. Athena falls to the deck below. The villagers scream. Yorgos runs to her side. Athena moans in pain. "Get her out of here," orders the soldier. Yorgos lifts Athena's limp body and carries her away. The crate carrying the statue of Aphrodite is lowered into the hold. The sky grows dark. The wind blows hard. The ship pitches violently at the dock. The crate carrying the arms and pedestal is heaved upwards. The sailors struggle against the wind and waves. The cut rope begins to unravel. A rogue wave hits the side of the ship, sending the sailors sideways. The crate swings wildly over the water, slams against the gunwales, and breaks apart. The arms of Aphrodite fall silently into the irretrievable depths on the bottom of the sea. Derville slams shut the logbook. Museum Garden, present day. Jane Vidal, museum conservator, sits in a quiet garden on the grounds of the museum. The sweet smell of flowers in full bloom fills the bright morning sunlight. Jane contemplates the beauty of a single rose. She buries her nose in the petals and breathes in the delicate fragrance. A quick glance at her watch lets her know it's time to get back to work. Jane strides across the museum grounds, past groups of excited school children spilling off buses. She smiles as she walks through the noise and chaos. Inside the museum, Docent George leads a group of boys to a marble statue entitled Venus Awakening. "Come on, boys, stay together." Docent Sarah assembles a class of schoolgirls in front of a painting called The Rape of the Daughters of Leucippus. Jane stops to listen. This painting shows the moment when Hilara and Phoebe are abducted by Castor and Pollux to be taken to Mount Olympus. The figures and horses are meticulously arranged within the picture plane to create a dynamic but balanced composition. Any questions? One girl standing in front is not buying the interpretation. "Why do men have to be such dicks?" Well... Stunned by the question, Sarah stammers, attempting to answer. She sees Jane at the back of the group. Ms. Vidal, can you help me out? Jane walks through the girls and stands next to the painting. Girls, this is Jane Vidal, our museum's conservator. I think she may be able to better answer your question. What was the question? Asked Jane. The sassy schoolgirl reconsiders her question. Why make a painting of two women being abducted and raped? I don't understand. Jane nods her head. It is confusing. It's important to remember this painting is a story from mythology, not a representation of a historical event. It's an allegory, a story intended to speak to our soul. A sweet voice chimes in. Like when a flower tells you something, but you don't quite understand, but you can feel it in your heart? The sassy schoolgirl gives her starry-eyed classmate a puzzled look. That's dumb. Flowers don't talk. If you listen with the ears of your heart, they do, replies Jane. The same thing with allegories. You need to see with the eyes of your soul. Jane interprets the hidden meaning of the painting. The girls hang on every word. The women represent our feminine nature. They are being elevated from the earthly plane to the divine plane. Not all women go willingly. Sometimes they are abducted and forcibly put into situations in life which require them to cultivate their masculine energy, their physical strength, courage, and action. Castor and Pollux represent that masculine energy. What do you think? It still looks like two men abducting women. Maybe we need a new mythology, suggests the starry-eyed girl. Meanwhile, a self-absorbed classmate who is barely paying attention, texting and taking selfies, chimes in. This is boring. Those girls are fat. Can we just move on? Loud laughter from the other side of the hall interrupts the moment. The schoolboys standing around the Venus statue are misbehaving, while Docent George is distracted talking to a teacher. One of the boys pretends to pinch the statue's butt. Jane gathers the girls close, turning their attention to the boys. Observe the male behavior as they encounter the feminine. The girls become anthropologists, observing a new human species. They are mystified by this sculpture, which is an allegory of awakening feminine energy. A couple of the girls snicker as they watch the boys' antics. They are unsure how to interact with the feminine. Some grab at it. Another makes fun of it, while the boys in the back are uncertain what to do, so they just watch. These young men are trying to understand the mystery of the feminine, just like you're trying to understand this painting. Really? It doesn't look like that. Jane enters the museum restoration lab and puts on a smock. She pulls out her phone, scrolls through a music playlist, and makes a selection. She settles in at a table where a Greek vase is in the process of restoration. She rotates the vase around, inspecting the progress, then resumes her work. Skillfully, she secures fragments of pottery in place. She picks up the next shard and examines it. Unsure of how to proceed, Jane walks over to an aisle of library books, searching for a specific reference. She stops at one written by Morgan Farrell, removes it, and returns to her work. Jane opens the book to a photograph of Morgan Farrell, world-renowned ocean archaeologist, standing in front of his famous research vessel, the Asteria. Clara, Jane's coworker, walks in and notices Jane looking at the photo. Are you looking forward to working with Morgan Farrell again? Yes, I'll be working aboard his yacht, Asteria. That sounds nice. Jane compares the shard of pottery in her hand to information in the book. Where is the site located this time? Off the island of Kefalonia. It's the largest shipwreck ever found in the Mediterranean. Are you authenticating the artifacts? No, the artifacts from the site are definitely authentic. As of right now, it's impossible to fake 2,000 years of sea incrustations. Morgan hired me to conserve and catalog the artifacts. Clara watches as Jane sets the pottery shard perfectly into place. He knows you're the best, Jane, and the man can afford anything or anyone he wants. I think he may be trying to recruit you for a position at his auction house. I'm not interested in providing wealthy clients with novel investments, flipping artwork like it's disposable real estate. The function of art is to communicate with the divine. Clara rolls her eyes. Yes, I'm familiar with your feelings about the function of art. It is through the arts that we find a passageway to a deeper understanding of our humanity. You mock me, but it's true. At least it is for me. Did you know the subatomic particles within this clay have been in existence since the beginning of time? And according to our story of creation, we're made out of clay. When I touch this ancient vase, I am touching the very essence of creation. Clara gives Jane a woeful look. Jane, honey, I think you may be spending a little too much time alone in the lab. Jane picks up several books from the table and walks back to the stacks. Clara follows. The Greek Museum called. Victor will pick you up from the Athens airport. Perfect. I'm really looking forward to seeing Victor and Marina again. As Jane reshelves a book, the red leather-bound logbook of Derville falls to the floor. Jane picks it up and opens it. Clara leans in. Looks like it's written in French. It is, confirms Jane. Seems to be some kind of journal or ship's logbook. What's that symbol on the cover? Jane touches the embossed leather. If memory serves me, that's the coat of arms of Louis XVIII. That dates it to early 19th century. I'll read through it, see where it belongs. Jane walks back to the table and places the logbook inside her briefcase. A little light reading for the trip. She snaps the briefcase shut. Athens, Greece. Jane! Jane steps out of the airport terminal and immediately recognizes the rugged Greek man striding towards her. Museum Director Victor Vlahakis. Victor, it's so good to see you! With arms open wide and a broad smile across his face, Victor has Jane in a mighty bear hug before she can even set down her bag. Shall I drop you at the hotel? I'd like to visit with Marina first, if that's okay. I was hoping you would say that. Marina has been in great anticipation of your visit. Victor races his car through the busy streets of Athens. How is Marina? Victor shakes his head. Let me tell you, Jane, it is not always easy working alongside my wife. She is a passionate woman, and of course I love her for it. Jane clutches her seat as Victor swerves to avoid hitting a motorcycle. Victor curses with vigorous hand gestures, then quickly returns to a jovial attitude. We are together at the museum all day, and if we have a disagreement, which of course happens all the time, I get no dinner at home. It is incredibly unfair. You know how much I love her cooking. Jane laughs. Poor Victor. Why don't you just agree with Marina from the start? You know she's usually right. I cannot do that, Jane. I am a Greek man. I must have a say. Out of the city, they make their way into a hillside neighborhood. Have you seen the artifacts from Kephallonia? Asked Jane. Yes, the condition is most excellent. You will enjoy working aboard Asteria. What a beast! All the latest equipment. I am surprised anything at the bottom of the sea has escaped Morgan Farrell's notice. Jane agrees. Maybe that's the key to his success. He does seem to have the Midas touch. The road narrows as they climb. You worked with Morgan last summer? Yes, when he discovered the lost city of Kokaira. His methods are unconventional, but you cannot argue with the results. The car comes to a jolting stop in front of a modest seaside home. Jane steps out of the car and takes in the panoramic view. I feel like I'm home. Victor leads Jane through an entry hall. Greek artifacts are on display. Jane stops at a red figure kylix. She becomes lost in thought. Victor turns around and walks back to her. The young fisherman. I remember when we found it. Jane gently touches the shallow cup. The surface is a little dusty, but my restoration work is still holding up. I learned so much that summer. You were our best student. Never have I seen someone so dedicated. Now that we can agree on. Jane smiles as Marina Vlahakis, museum curator and Victor's voluptuous wife, walks over to embrace her. Marina looks fondly at the young fisherman display. Doesn't it bring back memories? Can you believe it's been over 15 years? It was one of the happiest times of my life, says Jane. A photo mounted on the base of the display catches Jane's attention. In the photograph, a younger Jane stands next to a handsome young man. Jane's smile fades. Unfortunately, all paradises come to an end. You didn't keep in touch? Jane shakes her head. When I got home, I was hired by the museum. It was a dream come true. And your career has flourished. My love life, on the other hand, not so much. Marina takes hold of Victor's hand. Lucky for me, I've been able to satisfy both. Marina leads Victor and Jane through the kitchen and out to the terrace. She places a plate of dolmades and a bowl of yogurt on the table. Marina looks tenderly at Victor. For you, my love. Victor gathers his wife's hands and kisses them gratefully. He pulls out a chair for Jane and they tuck in. Jane dips a dolmade into the bowl of yogurt and takes a bite. She's in heaven. I've tried making these at home, but they never turn out the same. You come over one day. I'll teach you. Jane regards the dolmade like a piece of artwork. They're perfect. Look at the color of the leaves. She savors another bite. And the filling. The mint is perfect. Victor watches with approval as Marina places more food on the table. How did it go with the minister today? Inquires Victor. Marina takes a deep breath. The news she is about to deliver is not good. He is proposing deaccession. Jane abruptly stops eating. Sell museum artifacts? Marina shakes her head. I know, a mortal sin, but we need the funds. The museum is in trouble, Jane. But such a drastic measure. With staff salaries, educational programs, and storage costs, we're barely getting by. 80% of the museum's collection is in storage. A king's ransom they want for rent, grumbles Victor. Victor gives Jane a solemn look. The situation is dire, Jane. Seems we must sell pieces of our soul in order to survive. Maybe you'll meet a possible donor at the party tonight. What time should I meet you? It's a party, dear. Come any time. Jane strolls along the harbor. Morgan's yacht is festooned with lights. Music and laughter fill the air. Nikos Christados, living Adonis and crew chief of the Asteria, watches Jane approach. Jane stops a moment and looks out over the shimmering sea. The evening star shines bright within the deep blue and orange of the fading light. A magical breeze drifts across the water and presses the soft fabric of her dress against her body, revealing a sensual figure beneath. Jane closes her eyes and breathes in deeply. She opens her eyes and sees Nikos gazing at her. He gives her a faint smile. The sound of revelers breaks the spell. Jane enters a party in full swing. She scans the crowd. Victor sees Jane and waves her over. What a party! It's a who's who of the art world. Darling, go get Jane a drink. Marina and Jane scan the well-heeled crowd. Marina points out a few of the guests in attendance. The young man on the dance floor? Lucas Zimmer, Swiss banker. He collects pre-Columbian art. Wow, he's really getting his groove on. The woman singing in the pink dress is Florence Crane, Boston philanthropist. She has a passion for Greek art and is interested in funding our educational programs. That's great! Jane looks over at the bar and sees Morgan Farrell in conversation with a jovial man in a dark suit. And who's the man talking to Morgan? Andros Banaki, the Greek Minister of Culture. The one with the plan to save the museum? We'll see, replies Marina. Victor returns with a glass of champagne. Morgan certainly knows how to take care of his solid and ever-growing client base. Morgan looks up from his conversation and sees Jane. He walks over to greet her. Jane Vidal, what a pleasure to see you again. Hello, Morgan. I have to say, working aboard Asteria will be better than that hot tent. Lucky for us, we had the Adriatic Sea at our doorstep. Come, let me introduce you to some people. Morgan works the room with Jane at his side. The musicians begin to play a traditional Greek hasapiko. A few staff members take to the dance floor and link arms. Jane smiles excitedly. Come on, let's join them. I don't know the steps. Victor walks up to Jane and holds out his hand. Shall we? Jane and Victor link arms with the staff and rhythmically dance the hasapiko. Nikos watches from the shadows, a broad smile on his face. The song ends. The guests cheer and shower them in petals. Jane and Victor rejoin Morgan and Marina. Nikos walks over to them. Mr. Farrell. What is it, Nikos? The crew will remove the ghost net from the site in the morning. Conditions should be clear for an afternoon dive. Do you still want me to come aboard tomorrow? Asked Jane. Certainly. We'll take the morning to catch up. Nikos turns to Victor and Marina. Hello, Victor. Marina. A pleasure to see you again. Kalispera, replied Victor and Marina. Morgan notices Nikos looking at Jane. Jane, this is my crew chief, Nikos Christados. Jane feels her face go warm. I believe I saw you earlier when I was arriving, says Jane. Nikos flashes a knowing smile. Yes, you were enjoying the sunset. You are a client of Mr. Farrell? No, I'm conserving the artifacts from the site. So you will be working aboard the Asteria? Yes, says Jane with a smile. Shouldn't you be getting back to the bridge? Snaps Morgan. Jane and Marina watch Nikos walk away. Nikos seems like a capable young man, says Marina with a wink. Jane strides up the dock. Morgan comes out to greet her. Welcome aboard! Morgan pulls in a line from the water and signals Nikos at the bridge. Jane trips when she sees Nikos looking down at her. Watch your step. Here, let me help you with your bag. I'll show you to the guest room. Jane hands Morgan her bag and follows him up the gangway. Morgan opens a door leading down a passageway. They pass a messy bunk room where a few crew members play a lively game of cards. Morgan and the crew exchange good-natured insults in Greek. They're a bunch of animals, jokes Morgan. The crew members laugh. You would know, your mother was a goat. The crew cabins. Further down they pass another cabin, small, clean, Spartan. Nikos' cabin. He prefers to live like a monk. Is Nikos religious? Nikos is an enigma. The closest thing I can see to religion is his devotion to the sea. Morgan opens the door to a glorious stateroom. Jane looks around in disbelief. This is the guest room? When you spend as much time at sea as I do, it's good to have some space to yourself. Meet me on the Lido deck once you're settled in. Which way is the Lido? Before she has time to finish her sentence, Morgan exits through a side door. Jane explores the well-appointed stateroom as she unpacks her bag. She exits through the side door, which leads to Morgan's office. The walls are covered in photos of Morgan posing with famous people. Magazine covers feature his expeditions. Jane hears the sound of an instant message coming from a computer sitting on Morgan's desk. She moves in for a closer look. Morgan's auction site, Asteria, is on the screen. A photograph of a red figure cup is on display. Bidding has reached $35,000. Jane hears the sound of footsteps approaching. She quickly exits the office and runs smack dab into Nikos. Nikos eyes Jane with suspicion. What are you doing in Mr. Farrell's office? Jane nervously backs up. I'm supposed to meet him on the Lido deck, but I don't know where that is. I'll take you. Nikos leads Jane onto the Lido deck. Morgan watches them approach. So you've become a tour guide as well. I got a little turned around. Thank you, Nikos. A lovely brunch is laid out on the table. A cup of coffee? Asks Morgan. Yes, please. Morgan pours a cup for Jane as she settles into the lounge. She picks up a magazine laying on the table. I read your latest article in Archaeology magazine. What did you think? Asked Morgan. You make a compelling argument for repatriation of artwork. Works of art should be returned to their rightful owners. You're a woman of high morals, Jane, a rare quality these days. I also read that the market for ancient artifacts is on the rise. The highest it's been in years, confirms Morgan. Nothing like a historic discovery to entice new collectors and keep the market perking along. Morgan nods in agreement. It definitely helps. My passion for art is more spiritual than acquisition. They don't necessarily need to be mutually exclusive, Jane. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up. I would like you to come work for me. I need someone to lead my antiquities department. Jane thinks to herself, Clara was right. I admit the opportunity to work at the most exclusive art auction house in the world is a generous offer, But there must be plenty of eager candidates available. There are, but they don't possess your breadth of knowledge. 50% of the artifacts that come on the market are fake. I need someone I can trust. It's been my life's work. That's why you are my first choice, and truly my only choice. Time to come out of the shadows, Jane, and share your knowledge with the world. I'm truly flattered, but selling artwork as investments? Don't be too hasty in your decision. Let's say we put the topic aside for now and just enjoy ourselves. What time do we reach the site? Not for a few hours. Morgan opens a backgammon set. A game of backgammon? I remember how much you enjoyed playing. Nikos directs the crew as they haul an enormous ghost net out of the water. A turtle tangled within the net struggles to swim and breathe. Nikos carefully sets the turtle free. The crew members cheer. Nikos looks solemnly at Jane. This is how we treat the sacred. Jane is moved by his emotion. At least you were able to save one. Why do the fishermen leave the nets behind? Gear can malfunction, nets get caught on reefs, or they simply discard the nets to cover their tracks when fishing illegally. Unfortunately, no matter what the circumstances, they end up killing animals. The ship is a hive of activity. Morgan and Jane sit on the dive platform, conducting a last check of their scuba gear. You know how to self-arrest if you're caught in the current? Asks Morgan. Jane holds up the hook and tether line at her waist. Yes. Nikos sits next to Jane. He's all business. You have been to an underwater archaeological site? It's been a while, but I know the protocol, replies Jane. Keep clear of the equipment. The yellow tape marks the eastern boundary line. They splash into the water and swim down to a bustling archaeological site. Divers lift a huge basket laden with amphora to the surface. Nikos swims over to a diver using a vacuum to remove sand and takes over. Morgan and Jane join divers filling bags with artifacts. Out of the corner of her eye, Jane spies a flask. She swims over and picks it up. She examines the object, then carefully wraps it in gauze. As she puts the flask into a bag, the current lifts it out of her hands. It floats towards the boundary marked with yellow tape. Jane swims after it. Suddenly, the current catches her and sweeps her along the reef. Instinctively, Jane grabs the tether at her waist and hooks the rock as she passes and comes to a stop, the flask still in hand. Morgan and Jane lounge on the Lido deck. Morgan works on a laptop computer. Jane opens her briefcase and begins reading the logbook. Nikos walks up and hands Jane a towel. You were foolish to put yourself in danger like that. No object is worth losing your life. Nikos heads to the bridge and listens to chatter on the radio. He takes out a pair of binoculars and scans the horizon. A boat is visible in the distance. Morgan looks up from his work and notices the embossed cover of the logbook Jane is reading. The coat of arms of Louis XVIII? Yes, says Jane. The King of France did a bit of collecting back in the day. Looks like a ship's logbook. It is, she replies, although there are some personal entries written by Dumont d'Urville. From what I can make out, he's the ship's science officer. Morgan raises an eyebrow and taps his computer keys. Nico spies a flock of birds. Pelicans, off the starboard bow. Jane sets down the book and looks out over the sea. A squadron of enormous pelicans fly in silent formation. Jane walks to the railing. Nikos hands her the binoculars. They're huge. Dalmatian pelicans, 11-foot wingspan, the largest species in the world. Jane watches the birds glide inches from the surface of the sea. A cloud of water vapor shoots into the air. I think I just saw a whale spout. You did. There's a pod of sperm whales. I didn't know there were whales in the Mediterranean. There are. They are endangered. That ship out there monitors them. We can watch the divers. Nikos taps information into his computer. An underwater scene appears on the screen. A pod of sperm whales swim gracefully together. A baby calf keeps close to its mother. The baby was born last week. Nikos looks deeply into Jane's eyes. There is still hope. Jane walks back to her chair and continues with her reading. Seems disputes were a constant threat in the Mediterranean. The French, Ottomans, Venetians, everyone wanted control. Morgan nods. Control of the Mediterranean meant control of lucrative trade routes. And judging from these entries, the opportunity to snap up a few bargains on antiquities as well. Does the logbook mention the name of the ship? Asks Morgan. Jane turns to the front page. The Chevrette. Morgan taps his computer keys. Jane closes the logbook. I need to get started with cataloging today's artifacts. Jane works at a table in the ship's lab. Nikos enters. I can bring the next one when you're finished. I'm almost done here. Nikos notices the smile on Jane's face. You enjoy your work. It brings me great satisfaction, not to be overly effusive, but sometimes I feel like I'm on an adventure discovering the meaning of life. Effusive. I don't know this word. It means to be grateful and happy. Ah, like Greek maraki. It's a good word. That's how I feel when I'm at sea. Follow your passion, Nikos, and the rest will fall into place. Jane takes a photo of the vase, enters information into a computer, then carefully hands the vase to Nikos. As she waits for him to return, she opens her briefcase and removes the logbook. Jane turns the page to a map of Melos. Then she sees the illustration of Aphrodite. Her interest is instantly piqued. She continues reading, her eyes devouring each page. Suddenly, she stops and looks up. Her expression changes from academic interest to excitement. Oh my God! Nikos returns with another artifact. Nikos, do you happen to have a map of the island of Melos? Jane hears a heated conversation taking place on the terrace. She walks closer and sees Victor, Marina, and Andros Banaki seated at the table. I see no other way out of this crisis, insists Banaki. We must find another way, pleads Marina. Jane stops at the door. Marina sees Jane and motions her to enter. I'm sorry to interrupt. Would you like me to come back? No, of course not, dear. Come in. Marina introduces Jane to Andros Banaki. We were just discussing how to save the museum, says Victor. Banaki resumes his impassioned argument. Even if we increase the price of admission by €1, that won't help. Marina calculates the number. It would cover the cost of storage for a year. Banaki shakes his head. We need something that will make the museum financially stable for more than just a year or two. Yes, you are right, concedes Marina. Banaki continues. Egypt allowed the legal trade of antiquities for a while. Why not Greece? We create a properly licensed, legal trade in minor objects. The storage room is full of such artifacts, concurs Victor. Precisely. The sales would generate a revenue stream that would not only benefit the museum, but also protect archaeological sites. I spoke with Mr. Farrell at the party. He said he would be more than happy to assist with the sales. I'm sure he would, says Jane under her breath. Banaki shoots Jane a hard glance. Mr. Farrell doesn't want any fee. He wants to see the museum back on its feet. He checks his watch and stands to leave. I have a meeting I must attend. Banaki looks squarely at Victor and Marina. I think we should seriously consider it. Victor and Marina look into each other's eyes in despair. Jane breaks the uncomfortable silence. I guess now would be as good a time as any to tell you Morgan offered me a job. Marina is not surprised. You would be a valuable addition to Morgan's stable of talent. He wants me to head the antiquities department. I guess that would put me in charge of selling the museum's collection, if it comes down to that. But before that happens, I have something to show you. Jane opens her briefcase and removes the logbook. A book? A ship's logbook, and this alone is a historic find. Victor and Marina exchange a curious look. Go on, encourages Victor. This is the logbook from the Chevrette, a French ship that was sailing around Greece in 1820 during the period of Ottoman occupation. Not a happy time in our history, acknowledges Marina. Jane opens the book and shows them the illustration of Aphrodite. Ah! Exclaims Marina. Jane sits down and begins reading. From the farmhouse we acquired the statue of Aphrodite. She turns the page and scrolls down, looking for a particular sentence. She looks at them with excitement. This is the part that caught my attention. The arms are removed. They are lost to the sea. Victor and Marina sit dumbfounded. It is entirely possible, declares Victor. There are conflicting reports of how the statue was found. Victor, can you imagine, after 200 years? Jane pulls out a detailed nautical chart of the island of Melos. Where did you get this map? Asks Marina. From Nikos, replies Jane. Marina gives her a sly look. I told you he was a capable young man. Anyway, according to this map, the arms would most likely be located here. Jane makes an X. In the harbor, next to this rocky outcropping. Victor laughs. Jane, you of all people know that X rarely marks the spot. Well, at least it's a starting point. Melos is a volcanic island, warns Marina. There are many caves in the cliffs. The diving could be quite dangerous. Victor shakes his head as he examines the map. The sea won't give up her secrets easily. Jane is determined. The arms of the most famous statue in the world are at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea right now, and I know where they are. That's a risk I'm willing to take. She takes a breath. Do you think Morgan would help me? Another opportunity to make headlines? I think he would be more than willing, says Marina. Victor moves in close. But I wouldn't mention anything right now. Early stages. Jane nods. I'll scout the location first. Jane disembarks from the ferry and walks along a quaint oceanfront street. She enters a nautically themed dive shop. The sea-weathered boat captain sits in a chair repairing a fishing rod. The old man greets her with a warm smile. Kalimera. Kalimera, replies Jane. I called about hiring a boat for the day? Yes. You want to tour the island? Jane pulls out a map of Melos and points to the X. I want to go here. Jane and the captain board the dive boat and cruise across the harbor. Someone is watching them. The dive boat sways gently next to a rocky outcropping. Jane performs a final check of her equipment. I am telling you, you should not dive alone. Jane jumps into the sea. The captain shakes his head. Foolish. He looks across the water. A boat is heading his way. Jane swims through a school of fish and begins her survey. Laying out a transect line, she comes upon a patch of garbage. She pulls out a dive bag and picks up the trash. Something brushes up against her back. She turns around quickly and sees that it's a dolphin watching her. A plastic bag floats nearby. The dolphin grabs the bag with its mouth and gives it to Jane, then swims away. She sees the entrance of a cave and cautiously swims inside. An octopus darts past, startling her. The cave is too dark to explore, so she exits. Continues her survey, but finds nothing. Swimming back to the dive boat, Jane notices the shadow of another vessel. A hand reaches down to help her. She grabs hold and pulls herself up. Hello, Jane, says Nikos. Nikos, what are you doing here? Morgan said you may need some help. What? Morgan told me about the logbook, and then you asked me for a map of Melos. It wasn't difficult to figure out. Jane holds up a bag of trash. I did a little cleaning up while I was down there. The animals thank you. Funny you should say that, because a dolphin actually came over and gave me a plastic bag. The sea is full of wonder. Nikos helps Jane with her tanks, as the boat captain raises a tangled section of drift net from the water. How is the fishing? Asks Nikos. All has gone to hell. Look at what I find. The captain motions to the net. After 3 days fishing, I catch one fish. The commercial trawlers scooping most of the fish in the sea. They are bulldozers. They destroy everything. Soon, in 5 years, Mediterranean Sea gonna be a desert. Empty. Nikos nods in agreement. We need laws to protect the sea so the fish can return, declares Nikos. The captain shakes his head in defeat. But I am an old man, and to fight the government? And what can one man do? Adds Nikos. Jane looks squarely into Nikos' eyes. One man can change history. It happens all the time. It's part of your heritage. Alexander the Great, a young man just like you. Nikos looks at Jane with surprise. You think I can do this? Jane gives Nikos an encouraging smile. It was Alexander himself who said, "There is nothing impossible to him who will try." The captain slaps his hand on Nikos' shoulder. "She is right. We work together." Jane and Nikos sit at a weathered table. "Did you grow up sailing?" "When I was a boy, I had a small boat. I spent hours on the water by myself. It taught me to be self-reliant and respect the sea." "Were you ever afraid?" "Sometimes, but I learned to trust my instincts. They have served me well." The captain returns with plates of food. "Thank you," says Jane gratefully. She eagerly digs in. Nikos and the captain watch her eating. Her appreciation of the food makes them smile. "You like Greek food," says the captain. "I love Greek food. Greek art, Greek history, Greek music, Greek dancing," chimes Nikos. Jane nods her head. "But most of all, the Greek people." Nikos unfolds the map of Melos on the table. "So you are looking for a ship that sank in the harbor?" "Not a ship, cargo." "When did this happen?" asks the captain. 1820, replies Jane. "You are looking in the wrong place. The harbor wasn't here in 1820. "Where was the harbor?" "It was here." The captain points to a new location. "And depending on the weight of the cargo, it could have been carried in the current." He calculates using nautical instruments, then marks a new location on the map. "It would now be about here, next to this cliff." Morgan stands on deck, cleaning an amphora. He continues working as Jane approaches. "I trust Nikos was of help?" "Yes, he was. Turns out I was looking in the wrong place. Doesn't say much from my treasure hunting skills." "Lucky for you, you know me. I locate lost treasure. It's what I do best." Morgan lays the cleaning equipment aside. "I did some research on the Chevrette. The ship lost cargo while in Melos, but the contents weren't listed. I'm guessing that's what you're looking for?" Jane hesitates. "Morgan, the lost cargo contained the arms of the Venus de Milo." Morgan is astonished. "If they are retrievable, you will make history, Jane. My ship is at your service." Asteria drops anchor next to a steep cliff. Nico stands at the bridge, ready to operate the winch. Jane sits on the dive platform, eager to get started. "I don't see why the crew couldn't be here." "It's best to keep these preliminary surveys quiet." Morgan attaches a remote winch signal to his vest. "Were there any other objects listed in the logbook?" "The only other item mentioned was the pedestal of the statue." Nikos pushes a lever and lowers the winch line and basket. Nikos calls down to Morgan. "Check the signal." Morgan presses the red button on his vest. A red light illuminates on the control panel. Nikos presses the red button. The winch line reels in. "It's working," confirms Nikos. Morgan turns and smiles at Jane. "Are you ready to make history?" "Yes." The vast ocean floor stretches out before them. "Let's begin with 50-meter transects." Jane reels out a tape measure and records data as she swims down the transect line. While conducting his survey, Morgan finds what appears to be a block of stone buried in the sand. The surface is encrusted with barnacles and algae. He takes out his knife and gently scrapes away the incrustations. Greek letters become visible. "I found the pedestal!" He drives a marker into the sand and records the location. Jane and Morgan carefully excavate the edges of the stone until it is free. They attach a lift bag to the pedestal and load it into the basket. Morgan pushes the red button on his vest. The red light on the ship's control panel illuminates. The basket lifts as the winch line reels in. Nikos unloads the pedestal, then lowers the basket back down to Jane and Morgan. "We're definitely looking in the right area," confirms Morgan. "The arms should be close by." Jane sets out another transect next to the cliff. "There's an entrance to a cave over here. We need to set up a guideline before we go inside." Jane gives a thumbs up and continues her survey. A glint at the cave entrance catches her eye. "I see something." She swims down to investigate. A milky white arm becomes visible. It sways in the sand, beckoning her closer. She stares in disbelief. "I found one of the arms!" She reaches out and touches the glowing hand. The hand responds. Or did it? She yanks her hand away. A current lifts the arm and draws it deeper into the cave. Impulsively, she swims after it. "No!" yells Morgan. She looks back and sees Morgan. "We need the cave equipment." Jane turns and watches as the arm slips into the mouth of the cave. A bioluminescent glow trails behind. She is awestruck. "Jane! Jane! Are you all right?" "I touched it. I actually touched it." Jane is beaming as she works at her computer. "I can't believe it. I found them. Or at least one of them. It couldn't have gone far, and the other one must be close by." Nikos looks curiously at Jane. "What did you find?" Jane turns her computer around. On the screen is an image of the statue, arms intact. There. That's what she will look like when the arms are attached. Nikos looks at the screen. "You found the missing arms of Aphrodite?" "Yes," says Jane triumphantly. Jane looks over at Nikos. He stands at the railing looking out to sea. "Is something wrong?" "Yes, there is something wrong." "But the arms will finally be reunited with the statue." "That is true, but where is the statue?" "In France." "Exactly, France, not Greece. For the world, the Aphrodite of Melos is French, the Venus de Milo. Not even her name is Greek anymore. She is now only an object. The true meaning of the statue is gone. Finding the arms and simply reattaching them makes no difference. Let them lay in peace." Nikos walks away. "He has a point," agrees Morgan. "That we should leave them where they are? That they have lost their meaning. Of course the arms still have meaning. The goddess of love will finally have arms. Surely you can see the symbolism in that. But Nikos is right. The statue will still be in France. Maybe finding the arms will encourage the French to return the statue to Greece. That would help the museum. The goddess of love returns. Somehow, I don't think the French will see it that way." Jane sits wistfully. "I never thought finding something of such historic significance would leave me feeling so unhappy." Jane looks out her cabin window, lost in thought. There's a knock at the door. "Come in?" Nikos enters and sits next to her. "The arms are important to you." "Yes, but I also want to do what's right. Maybe they are just objects." "I heard what you said. You are right. The goddess should be made whole. If there is one thing the world needs now, more than ever, are the arms of women who bring love and beauty to the world. If finding the arms and reuniting them with the statue make that happen, then I will gladly lend you mine." Nikos reaches out and touches Jane's hand. Storm clouds fill the horizon. Asteria rocks on the waves. Morgan stands at the bridge watching the radar and listening to a weather report. He calls to Jane and Nikos. The radar shows a passing storm. Nikos glances up at the threatening sky. He is visibly concerned for Jane's well-being. "Have you been cave diving before?" "I took classes when I was certified, but it's been a while," confesses Jane. "I know it can be dangerous." His concern fills her with trepidation. Morgan listens to their conversation. This cave is unknown. It is easy to become disoriented and panic, especially on the first dive when you don't know what to expect. Stay close to Morgan. Your guideline is the winch line from Asteria. Like Ariadne's string. Exactly. Morgan stops putting on his gear. "Nikos, you have more cave diving experience. I think you should take the lead." Nikos nods his approval. Jane looks into Nikos's reassuring eyes. "I feel better knowing you're with me." Jane and Nikos bob up and down in the choppy sea. Morgan lowers the winch line and basket. Nikos calls to Morgan, "I'll check the signal." Nikos pushes the red button on his dive vest. The red light on the control panel illuminates. Morgan gives a thumbs up. "We're good to go." Nikos attaches the line from the boat to his belt. "Conditions can change quickly. Keep communication to a minimum. We need to preserve our oxygen." Jane clips the basket to her belt, her face full of apprehension. "We'll be all right. We just need to follow safety protocol." Jane and Nico swim into the mouth of the cave and switch on their lights. Jane scans the ocean floor. I thought the arm would be right here. Some caves create their own currents. This may be one of them. The cave narrows. Nico squeezes through a crevice. Jane follows, pulling herself through, then the basket. They swim through a passage that opens into a vast underwater cathedral, unfathomably beautiful. The water is gin clear. Nico sees a black tunnel off to the left of the main cavern. There's a tunnel over there. I'll check it out. I don't think we should separate. The arms may be inside. We need to cover as much ground as possible. You take the guideline and continue. I'll follow it back to you. Nico clips the winch line to Jane's belt, sets a second guideline at the mouth of the tunnel, and swims inside. The black tunnel snakes deep into the cliff. Stalactites and stalagmites cover the floor and ceiling like rows of sharp teeth. Nico hears a low rumbling from within the labyrinth. A current begins to draw him deeper into the cavern. A tremendous foreboding overwhelms him. Jane continues to search the sea floor. Her headlamp illuminates a glowing object. She swims closer. The arm becomes visible. Nikos, I see it! Jane listens. No response. Nikos, can you hear me? She feels a flash of panic. Stay calm, Jane, she says to herself. Maybe the cave is blocking communication. She begins to swim back to the tunnel, then hears, I'm on my way out. Relieved to hear Nikos' voice, Jane swims back to the arm. With scholarly precision, Jane secures the arm into the basket, then continues her search. She swims up along the walls of the cathedral, then looks back down the winch line. A pinprick of light pierces the darkness. Nikos is on his way. Jane sees a faint glow above her. She swims towards the light. She surfaces within a primeval grotto. Diffused light fills the chamber, but she can't tell where it's coming from. She scouts along the banks of the grotto, takes a quick check of her oxygen level. It's getting low. She dives back down. Swimming back across the vast center of the cave, her headlamp illuminates something sitting on top of a ledge. As she swims closer, she can clearly see the arm holding the apple. Her heart races. She reaches out and touches it. I found the other one! I can see you. I'm nearly there. Nico swims up. I found them, Nikos. I found the Arms of Aphrodite. Jane is filled with gratitude. I couldn't have done it without you. Thank you. Together they bundle the arms into the basket. I found an amazing grotto above. A low rumbling fills the cavern. Then silence. Something is wrong. We should leave now. Nikos pushes the red button on his vest to signal Morgan. Nothing happens. We must be too deep. Nikos coils the winch line into the basket as they follow it out of the cave. Returning through the narrow crevice, the basket gets stuck. Jane tugs on the basket. No movement. Nikos wrenches it from side to side. It won't budge. Nikos clips the winch line to the basket and gives the red button on his vest another try. On the surface, a storm rages. Morgan checks his watch and looks out at the angry sea lashing against the cliff. The red light illuminates on the control panel. He presses the button. The winch line reels in. Back in the narrow crevice, the slack in the winch line is taken up. The line goes taut and yanks the basket free and moves forward. Jane and Nikos in tow. A moment later, loud rumbling, followed by the deafening sound of rocks falling. Billowing clouds of silt fill the cave. Silence. An earthquake? Could be. The basket has stopped moving. Nikos pulls the line. It's gone slack. He continues pulling. The end is severed. Nikos swims into the murky cloud. A moment later, he returns. It's no good. The exit is blocked by rocks. Jane feels a wave of panic, then remembers. We can swim to the grotto. Follow me. Morgan holds on tight as the ship bucks wildly on the waves. He watches the winch line reel in. The end lifts out of the water. It looks like it's been chewed through. A flash of horror crosses his face. He runs to the bridge and radios for help.
Mayday, mayday, this is the hysteria, mayday.
Jane and Nico swim back into the underwater cathedral. They pass the black tunnel. The light of the grotto can be seen above. There it is! Jane's forward movement begins to slow, then stops completely. I'm not moving forward. She kicks hard, then begins to slip backward. It feels like something is pulling the basket. Nikos grabs Jane's hand, but it slips through. They are pulled into a wicked current and tumble out of control. Nikos manages to grab hold of Jane's ankle and they level out. The black tunnel comes into view, the basket heading straight into the mouth. Jane, the basket is pulling us in. Release the line. No! Release the line! Jane looks into the gaping jaws of the cavern and quickly changes her mind. She pinches the clip at her belt. It won't open. Use your knife. Jane pulls out her knife and cuts the line. Instantly, their motion stops. Jane watches as the arms of Aphrodite slip down the throat of the black tunnel. Nikos pulls Jane tightly to him. She opens her eyes. They are full of tears. She exhales deeply, then inhales, only to realize that she's out of oxygen. Terror crosses her face. She signals Nikos that she's out of air. Nikos checks his gauge. He's nearly out. Sharing the remaining oxygen supply, they swim into the light of the grotto. Nikos lifts Jane out of the water. She collapses into a heap of exhaustion and defeat. He removes his wetsuit and explores the grotto. Vapor seeps through the cracks in the walls. A sweet smell fills the cavern. Nikos looks around in wonder. Jane, look around you. Jane is completely spent. She barely lifts her head. Then her eyes go wide. The cave is covered in prehistoric petroglyphs. Oh my God! Nikos lifts the heavy tanks from Jane's shoulders and unzips the back of her wetsuit. The closeness of his body makes her shudder. Are you cold? Nikos puts his arms around her. In that moment, Jane surrenders to defeat and welcomes the solace of Nikos' loving embrace. I feel lightheaded. It could be the air. I think methane is sleeping in from the rocks. Jane turns to Nikos, his face young and fearless, inches from hers. I think it may be more than just the air. They walk over to a wall covered in dozens of handprints and place their hands in the void. I feel like I'm inside a dream, says Nikos. The epic artwork covering the walls is staggering. When were these drawings made? They appear to be from the Upper Paleolithic. Is this some kind of prehistoric church? That is one theory, that the artwork is a way to communicate with the divine. Jane steps on a small statue and picks it up. A pfaff! A what? A folded arm figure, from the Cycladic culture. They flourished in the Aegean Islands during the late Neolithic, early Bronze Age. Nikos finds another figure. This one doesn't have folded arms. A black Venus! This one is even older. So odd that it should be here. They're usually found in the Moravian Basin. Nikos smiles as he shows Jane another artifact. I'm pretty sure I know what this one is communicating. Jane feels a passion stir that has long been dormant. Then the academic returns. Hey, that looks very similar to artifacts found in Herculaneum. Nikos gazes in amazement at the drawings on the walls. Jane is a kid in a candy store, picking up artifacts, examining them, and grouping them together. The fertility figures are clearly prehistoric. The snake goddesses are Minoan. These other figures appear to be either Mesopotamian or Egyptian, and a Celtic Sheelanigig? Jane is perplexed. They span thousands of years, thousands of miles, from different cultures. How did they all get here? Nikos looks up and sees a sliver of an opening at the top of the cave. Maybe they came from up there. The sunlight shining into the cave refracts into 1,000 prisms. Jane steps around a corner. I found some coins and... Nikos pulls himself away from the dancing kaleidoscope of light. He turns the corner and sees Jane transfixed on an object protruding from the ground. What is it? An omphalos. A belly button? Jane laughs. That's right, Omphalo is Greek for belly button. It's an axis mundi. This marks the center of the world. Jane shows the coins in her hand to Nikos. There was one at the temple at Delphi. Jane examines the Omphalo. Maybe there's a treasure inside. That only happens in the movies. She reconsiders. I suppose anything is possible. They bend down and search the intricate engraved pattern with their hands, looking for a secret opening. Jane stands up and freezes in place, her eyes locked on something just behind Nikos. He sees Jane's expression, stands up, and turns around. A colossal statue of a woman, half human, half snake, sits before them in quiet repose. A mermaid? No, it's Echidna, the flesh-eating monster from the Odyssey? That's only one interpretation, sighs Jane. For eons before, she was known as the primordial mother of all life. Jane reaches out and touches one of Echidna's outstretched hands. Nikos touches the other. The ground begins to shake. Nikos points to the Omphalo. Look! The Omphalo begins to glow. The light from the stone spreads across the ground and permeates the statue. The statue fills with illumination. Echidna comes to life. She opens her eyes. The earth floats in starlight, her pupils black holes into the universe. Ocean waves crash around her face. Jane and Nikos stand awestruck. Echidna is beautiful beyond enduring. She curls her shimmering tails, stretches her arms in a languid motion, and moans in pleasure. Long have I slept. Who wakes me? She casts her eyes upon Jane and Nikos. A woman and a man. Her gaze, keen as lances, pierces their thoughts. No fear, I am but a humble servant. Her words are soft and comforting. What news do you bring? One of Echidna's tails coils around Nikos's thigh, then up around his waist. The other tail slides around Jane's hips. Echidna holds them before her like two dolls. She draws them close. Her mind penetrates their being. Echidna sees the history of mankind. Man's dominion over creation has led to much devastation and suffering. Echidna looks up to the heavens. Her vision travels through the galaxy in a beam of light. The dark rift appears. The door where the light is born has opened. It is time for man to take dominion over himself. She lifts the glowing Omphalo, now a kaleidoscope of gyrating color, and gazes into it like a crystal ball. Let us bring the light of compassion to the world. Echidna swallows the glowing orb. She looks deeply into Jane and Nikos. You are my witness. Echidna anoints Jane's mind and heart. She lifts Nikos and repeats the blessing. Echidna stretches out her arms and begins to sing. Two giant snakes emerge from the sea and slide into her hands. Echidna raises her arms. The snakes dance and intertwine. The light radiating from within her illuminates the chamber. Her body grows and fills the cavern. The paintings on the walls come to life. The cave itself begins to sing. Echidna opens her mouth wide like a basking shark. Jane and Nikos peer inside her body. The Omphalo is now a brilliant sun at the center of the galaxy. The snakes stretch out and descend into Echidna's mouth and swim to the sun. They pierce the surface and disappear inside. Echidna lifts Jane and Nikos high into the air. A blinding light emerges from between her split tail. Echidna delivers the sun into her waiting hands. Let us awaken the wisdom of our soul. With one mighty thrust, Echidna plants the Omphalo back into the earth. A shockwave of light and sound spreads outward from the axis mundi, over the planet, and across the universe. Echidna gently releases Jane and Nikos. Go now. It has begun. Echidna resumes the meditative pose she has held for eons and returns once again into stone. Behind her, a steep vertical stairway to the surface becomes clear. Jane and Nikos climb the precarious pathway. Upward they ascend. Roots and sharp rocks tear away their remaining clothing, leaving them naked. They emerge from the cave bleeding, bruised, and covered in mud. They collapse into each other's arms. Jane attempts to speak, but no words will come. Nikos gently touches a finger to her lips in an action of, say nothing. The branches of an ancient olive tree arch overhead. A little owl swivels its head around, regards them, and blinks. Jane and Nikos sit up and look around. The world is technicolor. Flowers spontaneously bloom in a riot of vivid color. The cave opening closes. In its place, a clear flowing spring. A woman is singing. In the distance, an elderly woman tends a bountiful garden. With careworn hands, she lovingly harvests ripe, juicy grapes from the vine. The old woman looks over to the olive tree and smiles. A moment later, she stands above Jane and Nikos. They look up with surprise into her kind, smiling face. Old man, come! They are here.